everyone, it's Allison. Welcome to my YouTube channel. We are going to have a lot of fun today because we are making tunnel box cards. Now I am featuring some new products from Spellbinders, some really great products, but obviously you can make tunnel box cards with whatever you have. So here are a few of the cards that I will be sharing today, but there are actually more than this because they're very addictive, so big warning. All right, let's look at what a tunnel box is. Now mine has 2 layers inside of it, or panels. You could have 1 panel in there, you could have 3 in there. It just depends what you want. Now let's talk about measurements. These are my first set of measurements that I started with. And by the way, the 6-inch measurement on all of these is because I decided to have a 6-inch high card. Now, I have not made tunnel box cards before, but I'm good at math, so I figured I can figure this out, right? Now I knew I wanted to use a regular sized piece of paper, a letter sized piece of cardstock, so I knew I was limited to 11 inches in length, and I figured I would start with a 4 1/4 inch front and see if I could get that out of a piece of paper. So you can pause this to see how I calculated the length of my paper, and you can adapt it to whatever you want. So this is basically how I came out with the length of this white piece of paper. And this piece right here is going to go in the back, and then these other 2, these are the inserts or the panels. And these get scored a 1/4 inch on each side. And speaking of scoring, I have the big Score Pal, which would have made it easy, but I decided not everybody might have the big kind, so I'm going to show you how you can do this on the Score Buddy or whatever scoring thing you have. Now this is the Place and Score embellishment wand from Simon Says Stamp. It has like a little stylus on one end, but you're probably going to laugh at me and leave comments, but I use the little bone folder that comes with my Score Buddy, and then I come in with the stylus. And by the way, I'm scoring at 3/4 inch, and now I'm scoring at 5 inches, and I have all the measurements on the screen. All right, and then I'm going to flip it around and do the exact same thing on the other side. So 3/4 inch and 5 inches. Now, why don't I use the stylus, the stylus, this little tool first? I find that I go off track when I use that alone. I don't know. I have scoring problems. All right, so here's this little insert panel that's going to go in the back, and that fits right in between all those score lines. All right, so here are my inserts, and I'm going to score at a 1/4 inch on the left and then 4 1/2 inches on the other side, which is basically leaving a 1/4 inch on the other side. Now my piece of paper I was just showing you was just slightly shorter than it should have been, but I'm still going to score at 4 1/2 because I want the measurement in between those score lines to be 4 1/4. All right, so now I am just reinforcing all of these folds. So we have the 2 inserts and then the box itself. And this is a really nice bone folder. I don't use this in my Score Buddy. And here's the box, and you'll see that everything looks as expected. My math skills seem to have come in handy. All right, let's look at some new nesting die sets that Spellbinders just released. There are a lot more pieces in each set. I was just looking at the 3 sizes that would fit on my card front. So from left to right, there's the scallop labels and tag. And these are the arch labels and tag that I'm looking at right now. And the fresh picked labels and tag on the right. And obviously the little die in the center of all these is the tag. That's why it's called labels and tag. And I was going to use this set at first, but I decided it wasn't going to leave enough open space for the scene that I wanted to do on this card. So I'm going to use the arches. So here are the 3 sizes that I picked, and I picked these 3 sizes because this biggest one that I'm using, that's about as big as I could get on this A2 sized basically card. So this is, remember, this is the box, so this is going to be the front piece, and I'm just lining it up in the center, just eyeballing it. And so there's my first opening. Now I'm going to grab the next size down, and I need to just make sure I'm grabbing the right one because these are very close in size. And so I'm taking my light blue color, and remember the inside of the score lines on both of these pieces is 4 1/4. So I'm just going to tape this in place so I can line up my die. So I'm going to line the die in there and kind of eyeball it, make sure it's nice and centered. And then I can send this through my die cutting machine. So this is going to be the first layer behind the white opening. And now these 2 pieces are the exact same size, so this is really easy. Just put them on top of each other, and then I can line this die up and run that through. Now I'm going to set these 3 pieces aside. I can layer these together and use these on another project. I do really like this arch shape. All right, so let's see what we have so far. Everything seems to be looking as it should. So now it's time to assemble. So on the sides where these score marks are, I'm going to put score tape, and this is an 1/8 inch score tape. Any double-sided tape will work. I've always used score tape. I like it. It's always been good to me. All right, so here's the second panel, and I'm just putting score tape on those folds. All right, now this is the back piece, the darkest blue, and it's the one with the smallest opening. I'm going to line this up with the score line furthest away from the front opening. So basically the second score line over. And I'm also paying attention to lining this panel up on the top and the bottom so it's even with my box. So I'm kind of eyeballing 2 things at once. And I just had to make a minor adjustment there. Okay, so now I'm going to take this second piece and I'm going to kind of butt that up right against the other piece. So it's just going to go right up against it. And I'm just kind of reinforcing that tape right there. All right, so let's see what we have again. Just kind of get an idea of whether things are going well or not. And everything seems to be going well. All right, so I'm just kind of getting my bearings, getting ready to close things up. And I'm realizing that I need to trim just a tiny bit so that this flap will close. Now, you may have noticed the mistake I'm about to make, but we'll get to that in a second. So I'm just going to trim a tiny bit off. And so now see that flap will close, so everything looks better, maybe. All right, so I'm going to remove the release tape, and I'm going to pull this side over and catch the tape. Now, it was at this point that I realized, well, at first I thought it was great, and then I realized the flap on the right side would end up closing it, it would basically leave the unfinished edge of the flap on the front of the card. So I realized I had to start over. I'm going to salvage those blue pieces. I'm not going to throw them away. You know, I don't like throwing things away. So I have cut and scored a new white panel, and I need to line up that arch again though. And this arch for the white panel is bigger than the blue arch. So I'm just going to grab a pencil and trace the blue arch opening onto my white panel. And that way I can center my arch on the white panel, and hopefully everything will line up again. I didn't want to throw out these blue pieces. So I'm putting new score tape on the pieces. And you can tell from the white panel that I had kind of practiced a little bit to make sure this was going to work. So here I am coming back in. I am placing that blue piece against that score line again, that far score line of the middle section. Okay, now I'm taking the front panel, or the front insert. I know I keep calling these different things: panels, inserts, layers, and I'm butting it up against the first one. Okay, I'm almost about to make the same mistake that I made last time, right? But I corrected myself. So again, I realized that I need to trim off a little bit to get the flap to close. So I'm just going to trim off a little bit. And so I'm going to pull off the release tape. And I'm going to bring that other side over, catch the tape. And it's looking okay. So look at those layers. It looks pretty good. So now I am taking, this is a 1/4 inch score tape, and I'm just going to put 2 pieces down the side, and then I can just fold the flap over. And now the flap is, you know, the unfinished edge of the flap is pointing towards the back of the card, which is what you want. So there we go. Here is my box card. Pretty cool, huh? All right, now it folds flat, and this particular one measures 5 inches wide when flat. So you can just put it in a 5x7 envelope. All right, here's another oops that I made. I forgot to glue my back panel on before closing up my box. So I'm, problem solving again. And I'm just going to slide it in there and press it down, and it'll be like it never happened. All right, we're going to be using the Fair Winds collection. The die set on the left is called Guiding Light, and all these pieces make a lighthouse, and there's some birds. Now this is the Buoy die set, really cute. There's a pylon and a seagull, and I made water from the color block Cloudscape. So if you have cloud dies, just flip it over and you can make water. All right, I'm not going to show you the whole assembly because a lot of this is just gluing. We already did the hard part. Now for this rock or peninsula, whatever you want to call it, I did chop part of it off so that it didn't come too far into my scene. And for the water, I am just inserting it from below and gluing it to the arched panels. And I cut the water out of the same color of the panel that I'm putting it on. And by the way, when you're gluing things in here, sometimes it helps to press it flat in order to get everything to glue down really well. Now, as soon as I put the pylon in, I realized that I needed more water. I needed water in front of it. So for this, I'm putting glue on the front of the water because I need it to attach it to the back of the front piece of this white piece. So I'm just going to press that down, and then I can put my pylon in. And isn't that cute with the little rope detail? Now, the seagull doesn't have a whole lot to attach to. Poor little guy. Isn't he cute, by the way? So I cut a small scrap of heavy cardstock, and I'm going to use that to reinforce where the bird will attach to the side. So I'm attaching it to the back of the arch panel. And now I can glue him. His feet are going to attach to the pylon, but everything else is going to attach to that side panel. Now here's the last little detail. Some of these little birds. Now here are the Fair Winds sentiments. This is part of the collection, and you can see that it has matching dies for the large sentiments, which I love. And there's some really nice inside sentiments as well. So I picked the Happy Father's Day, and there's the finished card. So it stands on display. I think it's just a really fun thing to give to somebody. So here you can see all the layers, and it's just really fun. Isn't that lighthouse really cool? All right, let's try this again. I'm going to use the same measurements as before, so you'll see the measurements on the paper. Okay. So I'm going to score at 3/4 of an inch, then 5 inches. And then instead of flipping, I'm just going to 5 3/4. And then I'll flip it and just do the 3/4 on the other side. And I'm going to reinforce all the folds, and there's the box. Now the other pieces are the exact same as before. I'm scoring at 1/4 inch from each side and reinforcing those folds. And again, I'm using 2 inserts. Now here's the underwater tunnel die set. Super fun. This is from the amazing Scapes collection by Vicky Papiano. And I'm just in love with this collection. So these dies are really fun, and they're very abstract, and you don't have to be exact in lining them up. So here you can see I've already cut it from the front panel, and I don't need to line the second panel up with the first one because, you know, it doesn't line up. So I can just eyeball the center of that one. And by the way, I'm setting all these shapes aside, just like I did with the arches. And here's the smallest die. Again, I didn't need to line it up with anything. And now you get a different look depending on how you flip each of these. So I am just kind of playing around trying to decide which look I like the best. And when I finally decide on the orientation that I like, I'm just going to mark the top of each panel with a pencil just so I don't forget. Okay, so just like before, we're going to line this back piece up against that far score line. And then the second one just goes right up against that. And I remembered on this one to put the panel on before closing up the box. All right, I'm ready to start closing things up. And once again, I noticed that I need to trim a little bit in order for that flap to close. So I'm just gonna grab my guillotine trimmer and trim a little bit off. All right, so just like before, I'm gonna pull the release tape and close it up. All right, now, again, I'm going to use the 1/4 inch score tape to seal up the box. And this is always the moment of truth when you open it to see what you got. Now the front panel of this was I guess the spacing wasn't perfect, but that's okay. You can't tell by looking at it. All right, this is the Underwater Marine Life die set. Again, from the Scapes collection. And the coral is from the Underwater Tunnel set, the same set as those shapes were from. And this is the Typewriter Adventure Sentiments from the collection. And there are sentiments that are specific to the theme of the collection, but there's also a bunch of everyday sentiments, and it's a really great set. Now, I didn't show this assembly of this because it was just basic gluing. I did actually have to edit this one down because I went a little crazy at first. I was putting like every fish in the world on this card. And you'll see the Dive into Happiness is from that stamp set. All right, now remember when I said I was setting aside those shapes from the panels on the previous card? Well, I used those pieces for this card. And this is the Perched Birds Die Set from the same Scapes collection. And I just adore this card. I think it's just very modern looking, and I don't know, it's just really cool. And I used, again, one of the sentiments from that stamp set. All right, now remember how I kept having to trim a little bit off the flap towards the end of assembly on the previous cards that I've showed you? So I've come up with a different length to start off with. So I'm going to score at the same measurements, 3/4 of an inch, then 5 inches, and then 5 3/4. So these are the same measurements, right? Now the only difference is when we flip and score on this side, I'm going to score at a 1/2 inch, and that's because the distance between those score lines, it needs to be the 4 1/4. Okay. So now I'm going to end up with, when I reinforce these folds, I'll have one flap that's longer than the other. Okay, but it's still going to fold up. Now all the other pieces are once again the same as before, and I'm going to use these shapes again to make my openings. Now we have the shorter flap on one side again and the longer flap, and I'm cutting my opening on the side with the longer flap. So I'll send all of these through my die cutting machine. And now I'm still in search of the perfect spacing, so we're going to try something different. Instead of starting with the back layer, I'm starting with the front layer. And I'm just kind of trying to make sure that I have good spacing between this front layer and the front opening. And I'm also just making sure it's even with the other score line. So it's looking pretty good. And so now I'm going to take this second one and butt it up against the first one. So I'm kind of working backwards from what I was doing before. And now see how this short flap perfectly covers these two pieces? And that's because, remember, this short flap is a 1/2 inch. And each of these score lines are a 1/4 inch. So it makes sense. Now you'll see I originally was going to use a green back for this card, but I thankfully switched to orange because I just adore this color combo. And you'll see how I sealed that up. I just took that short flap and closed the short flap on those panels. So now I'm just using a little bit wider score tape on here, and now I can close up the box. And there we go. And again, I didn't get perfect spacing, but you know what? I'm okay with this. When you look at the card from the front, you can't tell. And speaking of the card, here we go. I am just in love with this card. And you'll see how it fit into a 5x7 envelope. And you can put a panel on the back with your handwritten or stamped sentiment. Now again, I use the Perched Birds set for this card. And you'll see I put some leaves on some of the layers. Now the flowers come from another set in this collection called Rainbow Slice Tunnel, and that's a really awesome set, and I haven't even started playing with that yet. Now you'll see I had started putting gems on here. Spellbinders has come out with a bunch of new gems to add to their huge growing collection of embellishments. So I'm going to use some of the peach blush and the peridot gems. So you'll see that I've added those. Now I just wanted to show you, if you do add gems into a tunnel card, try flattening it to make sure that when it flattens, it's not going to sit on top of a gem, because if you put that in the mail, the gem might, just poke up through the paper and leave a mark on the paper, and then your tunnel box card won't be as pretty. So here is that finished card, and you'll see the sentiment at the top, the Just a Note, is from that same stamp set that I just love that stamp set. All right, so here is another card that I made with the Underwater Marine Life set. These are all of my happy colors all in one place, and I love this card. And then here's another one that I made with the June Large Die of the Month kit. How fun is this? I think these shapes are so fun to use with tunnel cards. They're just really unique shapes, and the possibilities are endless. So I have just got to stop because this has been really addicting. All right, so now what have we learned? I think the biggest lesson was that there are different ways of getting to the same result, right? So you saw me using slightly different measurements, slightly different techniques, and I always got a tunnel card at the end. Now, sometimes the layers might not be evenly spaced, but you can't tell by looking at the front. And I'll be honest, I thought I was doing something wrong. Well, I mean, there were a few instances where I showed you that I did things wrong, but when I wasn't getting perfect spacing, I was like, why? My math is perfect. What's going on? Why isn't this working? But you know what? Just have fun. And if you try a tunnel card and it doesn't work out the first time, try again. You saw me, hitting bumps in the road, and I just adapted. I made adjustments. I trimmed where I needed to trim, and I figured it out. And, I like challenges. That's why these tunnel cards were so fun. And I think, when you tape that last, when you tape the last flap and you see the result, it's so fun. All right, I know this isn't like other tutorials that you might watch on tunnel cards, where somebody who actually knows what they're doing says, here are the measurements, here's exactly what you need to do, and then the tunnel card turns out perfectly. I don't know if you haven't noticed, I show you mistakes. I kind of try to keep it real. There are things that I leave in my videos that others might take out. It's probably why this video is so long. But again, I like to show you what the real process was, and hope that it helps you in some way. If anything, I hope that you can tell how much fun I had doing this, even when I was making mistakes. I actually like challenges, so I like figuring things out. And I don't know, I was just super inspired by the products, by, doing something new, all of it. All right, let's wrap this up. I really appreciate you being here as always. If you liked this video, please give me a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. That is it for me. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.